You're tuned in to Ghost Frequency. Tonight, we're leaving the safety of city lights and heading into the endless dark, the highways that never truly sleep. Out there, in the hum of diesel engines and the rhythm of broken white lines, something else moves. Something that watches from the tree line, follows just beyond the mirrors, and whispers through the static of late-night radio. In this transmission, we bring you 8 true accounts from America's open roads, stories shared by truckers who've seen what most of us could never believe. Each encounter has been reconstructed from real testimonies, dispatch logs, and the words of drivers who still can't explain what found them out there in the dark. From phantom rest stops that vanish by sunrise to voices that bleed through the radio from nowhere, these are the secrets the highway keeps, the kind that make even the toughest drivers pull over and wait for dawn. If you're new to Ghost Frequency, hit subscribe and keep your notifications on, because once the road starts calling your name, it's already too late to turn back. The static-laced silence on Channel 19 usually meant a dead zone, but tonight it meant something far worse. Eastbound Pete with the reefer trailer. You need to slow down in this weather, driver. Mike Rodriguez gripped the wheel of his 2018 Peterbilt 579, knuckles white against the dark plastic. 23 years hauling freight across America, and he'd never heard a voice quite like this. Distant, hollow, as if speaking from a tomb. Outside, the Texas Panhandle was a white blur. Snow, thick and vicious, cut visibility to barely 100 yards. His rig, normally a beacon of comfort on the endless blacktop, now felt like a coffin hurtling through a blizzard. He'd been running a standard electronics load, LA to Nashville, making good time until the weather turned. His Cobra 29 CB, custom installed and usually crystal clear, had suddenly flickered to life after going terrifyingly dead. He'd barely been able to adjust the squelch before the voice cut through, pinpointing his exact truck, his exact cargo, his exact direction. No other headlights pierced the swirling snow, front or back. "This is the eastbound Pete," Mike keyed the mic, his voice steadier than he felt. "Who am I talking to, driver?" A pause. 10 long seconds of sizzling static, then the voice again, closer now, but still carrying that unsettling echo. "You're making good time, Mike. Been pushing hard since you left Amarillo, have you not?" Ice crystals formed on Mike's spine. His name, Amarillo. He'd never mentioned either on the air. He snatched up his logbook, departed Amarillo at precisely 9:15 p.m. This wasn't a random driver. This was someone who knew too much. "How do you know my name?" he demanded, trying to mask the tremor in his voice. "Oh, Mike, I know a lot about you. 23 years on the road, married to Linda for 18, 2 kids in college. You drive this route 6 times a year, always stop at the same truck stops, always order the same meal at the diner in Oklahoma City." Every word was a fresh arrow. Linda, his wife of nearly 2 decades. Emma, his junior at Texas State. David, beginning his journey at Oklahoma University. The familiar route, the 6 annual runs for the electronics company, even Mel's Diner in Oklahoma City for their chicken fried steak. It was all terrifyingly accurate. He fumbled for his cell phone, his hands shaking, desperate to call 911 to find a rational explanation. But the screen glared back at him. No signal. Impossible, not on Interstate 40, dotted with cell towers every few miles. The voice returned, now right there, in the cab with him, a spectral whisper against his ear. "Do not bother with the phone, Mike. No one can help you now. You see, I've been waiting for you, waiting for someone like you anyway. Someone who takes this route regularly, someone who drives alone, someone who won't be missed for a few days if something were to happen." Mike slammed the accelerator, the Peterbilt lunging forward, speedometer climbing to 80 mph despite the treacherous snow and ice. He had to reach the next truck stop, find people, escape this nightmare. Running won't help, Mike, the voice crooned, calm and chilling. I can see you speeding up. I can see your knuckles white on that steering wheel. I can see the sweat on your forehead despite the cold outside. That's when the deepest dread settled in. He'd been checking his mirrors constantly. Nothing. No other vehicles. Just the swirling white abyss. Whoever was speaking, they weren't in another truck, weren't paralleling him. They were somewhere else. Yet they saw everything. "Where are you?" Mike roared into the mic, desperation thick in his throat. "How can you see me?" The laughter began then, a sound that curdled his blood, starting low and building to a guttural, echoing shriek that filled the entire cab. It sounded ancient, the laughter of someone long dead. "Where am I, Mike? I'm right here. I've been right here for 27 years, ever since my rig went off the road in that blizzard, ever since I jackknifed on the ice and rolled down that embankment just ahead of you, ever since I died alone in the cab while my CB radio crackled with voices of drivers who couldn't stop to help in the storm." Through the swirling snow, Mike saw it, a dark, twisted mass at the bottom of an embankment off to his right. The remains of a semi-truck, tractor separated from trailer, both caked in snow and rust. Old skid marks traced a ghostly path from the highway's edge. "Do you see me now, Mike? Do you see my grave?" As the Peterbilt roared past, its headlights swept across the overturned cab. For a split second, Mike saw a figure. A man in a flannel shirt, a trucker cap pulled low. His face, ghastly pale, reflected Mike's headlights like the eyes of a cornered animal. The radio crackled one final time. 27 years I've been waiting for someone to stop, someone to remember that a driver died here. 27 years of watching trucks pass by without so much as a moment of silence for a fellow driver who gave his life to these roads. But you, Mike, you are going to remember. You are going to tell everyone about what happened here, about how truckers used to look out for each other, about how we used to honor the dead. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, silence. The radio died, and this time, it stayed dead. 3 hours later, in Oklahoma City, Mike staggered into a truck stop. The first person he found, a grizzled old-timer behind the fuel desk, listened patiently. "Tommy Martinez," the man said, nodding slowly. "Good driver, family man. Died right there in a rollover, February 98, 27 years ago." Back home, Mike had his top-of-the-line Cobra 29 examined by 3 different electronics shops. Each technician gave him the same baffling report. The radio was working perfectly. The last connection on my rig was solid, every wire precisely where it should be. There was no earthly reason for her to die on that stretch of highway, not that night. But the silence, the cold dread, and the voice. I know what I heard. Now every single time I pass that embankment, I ease off the accelerator, almost reverently. I key the mic, whisper a few words for Tommy Martinez, the trucker swallowed by the snow an eternity ago, 27 years to be exact. And sometimes, just sometimes, a faint, almost imperceptible whisper answers, "Thank you, driver." Then, just as quickly, the static reclaims the line, thick and cold. 15 years I've run this route. Phoenix to Denver, Interstate 17, then 40, then 25. Every turn, every dip, every damn pothole is etched into my mind. I know every truck stop, every greasy spoon, every weary rest area like the back of my own calloused hand. So when it happened, just last month, it shattered the bedrock of everything I believed. My name is Robert Hayes, and I've seen this country unspool beneath my wheels for 20 years. I could drive this route blindfolded. I've made this exact run over 300 times without a whisper of incident. Yet what I'm about to tell you will challenge the very fabric of reality itself. It was a Tuesday in November. One of those perfect desert evenings that wraps around you, the air sharp and crisp, the stars so close you feel you could pluck them from the velvet. I was hauling electronics from a warehouse in Tempe, pushing for a distribution center in Denver. Nothing out of the ordinary, just another run. I'd rolled out of Phoenix at 2 in the afternoon, making excellent time across the high desert, the Arizona landscape blurring into soft hues of purple and rust. By 9:30, the sprawling lights of Flagstaff began to bleed into the horizon. My fuel gauge hovered just under a quarter. Every seasoned driver knows you top off in Flagstaff before braving the long, lonely stretch through New Mexico. There's a pilot at exit 201 off I-40. Clean, decent food, fair prices, parking for a full rig. I've probably gassed up there 200 times over the years. But as I neared exit 201, a prickle of unease snaked up my spine. The familiar neon glow of the pilot, its bright red and blue visible for miles, wasn't there. Instead, a smaller, older sign, its yellow letters faded and peeling, simply read, "Desert Rose Truck Stop." I figured maybe a buyout, a rebrand, though it felt wrong. I'd just been through here 3 weeks prior, and everything had been normal. I took the exit. The road itself was wrong. Not the wide, smooth entrance I knew, but a narrow, cracked 2-lane path that snaked back into the silent desert before spilling into a desolate lot. Weeds clawed through breaks in the asphalt. The whole place sagged with an air of profound neglect, a ghostly echo of what should have been. The truck stop itself was a low, single-story building, its faded turquoise paint peeling like sunburnt skin. Half the parking lot lights were dead, plunging vast sections into inky shadow. 8 or 10 other trucks hunched in the gloom, forgotten beasts from another era. No gleaming Peterbilts, no sleek Kenworths. These were relics, their metal weary, their chrome dull. I parked my modern Freightliner Cascadia, all sleek lines and LED glare, next to a weather-beaten Mack that looked old enough to have fought in Nam. The fuel pumps were anachronisms, their mechanical numbers flipping with a clatter, not the silent digital displays I'd known for decades. The diesel price, emblazoned on a grimy sign, froze my breath. 98 cents a gallon. A ghost price, a whisper from the early 90s. Inside, the chill deepened. Dim, jaundiced light bled from unseen sources, coating everything in a sickly amber. The floor was stained, cracked brown linoleum. The walls, fake wood paneling that had probably been stylish when the Berlin Wall was still standing. Behind the counter, an elderly man, his gray hair thin as spider silk, looked up. His eyes, magnified by thick glasses, seemed utterly vacant. "Fill up," he rasped, his voice a gravelly echo from a deep well. "Yeah, diesel, pump 4, I replied, pushing my credit card across the counter. He took it, turning it over and over in his gnarled hands as if it were an alien artifact. "Cash only, son." That was the first clang of the bell, the first real warning. Every truck stop in America takes plastic. Yet I was tired, my eyelids heavy, and I just wanted out. I spotted what looked like an ATM in the corner, an ancient hulk with a tiny, flickering green screen. I tried to insert my card, but the slot was too narrow, designed for a different era of plastic. "ATM's broken," the clerk mumbled, eyes fixed on an old newspaper. "Bank closed in 1987. I shuffled to the food section, hoping for a decent coffee. The shelves were museums of the forgotten, glass Coca-Cola bottles with retro labels, candy bars in packaging I hadn't seen since grade school, newspapers screaming headlines from the 1980s. The coffee machine was a percolator, spitting thick, black liquid that smelled like it had been stewing for days. The other customers, they were all wrong. Flannel shirts, faded baseball caps, haircuts long out of fashion. One man was engrossed in a paper, a headline blaring about the Challenger space shuttle. Another grumbled about gas hitting $1 a gallon. "Excuse me," I said to the man with the newspaper, my voice sounding strangely loud in the quiet. "What's the date today?" He looked up, his expression a mixture of confusion and pity. "November 15th, 1986, of course. You feeling all right, son?" My blood turned to ice. November 15th, 1986. 37 years ago. I wasn't even born yet. Yet here I stood, in a fully functioning truck stop, surrounded by people who genuinely believed they were living in the past. My cell phone. No signal. Impossible. This area was crawling with towers. I stumbled outside, desperate for the cool night air to clear the fog from my brain. My truck, my gleaming 2021 Freightliner Cascadia, sat like a spaceship among the rusted relics, its modern lines stark against the weathered machines. I had to leave. Fuel or no fuel, I had to get out. I climbed into the cab, the engine roaring to life with the familiar comfort. But when I tried to back out, she wouldn't move. The wheels spun, the engine hummed, but it was like she was mired in concrete. Forward, reverse, nothing. Immobile. That's when I saw them, the other truckers. They stood outside their cabs, staring at me with those same empty, vacant expressions I'd seen on the clerk, motionless, silent. Their trucks weren't running either. No exhaust pluming from the stacks, no engine rumble, no lights glowing in the dimness. They were just there, parked, frozen. "Breaker 19, I barked into the CB, my voice desperate. "Freight dog to any eastbound traffic on Interstate 40. I need assistance at the Desert Rose truck stop, exit 201. Anyone copy? Come back." Nothing, just the rasp of static. I tried every channel, called for emergency assistance, even tried to hail the pilot that should have been here. Silence. My radio was screaming into a void. I snatched my cell phone, tried 911, but the screen glowed. No service. Not even a single bar. All modern technology, utterly dead. The crowd in the parking lot was swelling. More men emerged from the building, all in outdated clothes, all with those hollow, lifeless eyes. They began to walk, slowly, deliberately, toward my truck. Their movements were eerily synchronized, like figures in a macabre ballet. I jammed the accelerator, the engine screaming, but my truck remained rooted. Through my mirrors, I saw them closer now, 20, 30 pale, expressionless faces. They weren't breathing. And then, the horrible truth slammed into me like a phantom rig. They weren't people. They were echoes, shadows, specters from a lost era, trapped in this place outside of time. The Desert Rose wasn't a truck stop. It was a supernatural trap. A cruel pocket of the 1980s, eager to claim its newest victim. I closed my eyes and concentrated harder than I ever had in my life. The spectral image of my wife, Linda, flickered, dissolving the phantom truck stop where 98-cent gas beckoned. My children's faces, sharp and present, materialized over the faded yellow sign of the Desert Rose, anchoring me to the year 2024, to the authentic thrum of my real life. The sudden lurch of my truck nearly pitched me into the steering wheel, a jolting return to the familiar. The spectral truckers, their vacant gazes fixed on some unseen horizon, had vanished. I was in the pilot parking lot I'd expected all along, its modern blue and red sign glowing against the night. Digital pumps stood sentinel beside current model trucks. 10 long minutes I sat there, the tremor in my hands a stark counterpoint to the mundane reality around me. My phone showed full signal, the correct date and time. The fuel gauge still rested just under a quarter tank, precisely where it had been before. Inside the pilot, a young woman with a friendly smile, dressed in contemporary clothes, processed my card. "How are you doing tonight?" she asked, her voice a warm, casual melody. "Has there ever been a truck stop called the Desert Rose at this location?" I asked, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. Her brow furrowed. "Not that I know of. This pilot's been here about 12 years. Before that, just empty desert." A beat of puzzled silence. "Why do you ask?" The truth, raw and unbelievable, stuck in my throat. "Just thought I remembered something different. Thanks." The drive to Denver was a silent blur, the CB radio dark. Back home, propelled by an unease I couldn't shake, I researched the Flagstaff area. What I found chilled me like a winter wind in August. The Desert Rose had indeed stood there, swallowed by a fire on November 15th, 1986. 23 souls, including the owner and most of his regulars, had perished. The cause? Undetermined. The site remained barren until the pilot rose in 2012. I still trek that route twice a month, stopping at the pilot for fuel. But sometimes, as the night deepens and I near exit 201, a faint yellow sign ghosting at the edge of my vision. The Desert Rose. Trapped in the amber glow of November 1986, it waits, a siren call to drivers seeking cheap gas. I know, with a chilling certainty, that if I ever truly see that sign again, if I let myself believe, I'll become one of them. A vacant-eyed shadow, another member of their eternal convoy of the dead. I've spent 30 years hauling freight, and in that time, I've learned one immutable rule. Do not ask about the cargo. Pick it up, deliver it, get paid. Simple, yet some loads make you wish you'd shattered that rule to a million pieces. My name is Marcus Thompson, and what I'm about to tell you has haunted my nights for 6 months, forcing me to confront everything I believed about right and wrong, about the thin line between following orders and doing what's moral. 3 decades on the road, carrying everything from squawking chickens to classified military gear to life-saving medical supplies. I prided myself on professionalism, reliability, discretion. When a shipper tells you to keep your mouth shut, you zip it. When they double the rate for a rush job, you take the money and you drive. It was a philosophy that had served me well, a bedrock principle, until the night I picked up the load that unmade me. The call came on a Thursday evening in early September. I was parked at a truck stop outside Memphis, finishing my mandatory rest, mapping out the next leg. The dispatcher wasn't a familiar voice, but he claimed to represent a logistics company with ties to shippers I'd worked for before. The job seemed straightforward. Nab a sealed trailer in a Memphis industrial zone. Drop it at a warehouse near Little Rock, Arkansas. Tight timeline, before dawn. But the pay was astronomical. $3,000 for what should have been a 4-hour run. "What am I hauling?" I asked, a standard question for insurance and safety. "Medical supplies," the dispatcher replied, a little too quickly. "Time-sensitive pharmaceuticals, requires specific temperature control. Trailers loaded and sealed. Just hook up and drive. Don't stop for anything but fuel if absolutely necessary, and do not open the trailer. Client is very particular about maintaining the cold chain." Medical supplies. The words were a comfort. They explained the rush, the exorbitant pay. Pharmaceutical companies, I knew, paid top dollar for emergency, temperature-controlled deliveries. I'd handled similar loads before without a hitch. I took the job, got the directions. The address led me to an abandoned industrial district on the outskirts of Memphis, a maze of derelict warehouses and overgrown lots, the kind of place that felt predatory, even in daylight, outright menacing after dark. The assigned warehouse was nondescript, no signage, barely any light, tucked away at the end of a dead-end street. A single security guard, a grim silhouette against the sparse orange glow, waved me to a loading dock where the trailer waited. It was a standard 53-foot refrigerated unit, ghost white, completely unmarked. The refrigeration unit hummed, a low, constant drone. The guard shoved a minimal packet of paperwork into my hand. No detailed manifest, no special instructions, just a basic bill of lading listing medical supplies and the Little Rock address. "Trailers sealed and ready," the guard grunted as I backed my tractor towards the kingpin. "Boss says to remind you, don't open it for any reason. Temperature alarm goes off. You call this number immediately." He handed me a business card with nothing but a phone number, stark black on white. I hooked up, connected the airlines and cables, then performed my usual pre-trip inspection. Everything looked normal. The reefer was holding a steady 38 degrees Fahrenheit, perfect for most pharmaceuticals. The trailer doors were double secured, a standard lock and a tamper-evident seal. I signed the paperwork, took my copy, and pointed my rig toward I-40. The first hour was routine, light traffic. The trailer tracked perfectly. The refrigeration unit held its temperature without a hiccup. I made good time through Memphis, settling in for what I anticipated would be an easy run. That's when the sound started. A faint scratching. At first, I dismissed it as cargo shifting. Loads often settled, especially if improperly secured. But as I listened closer, a chilling rhythm emerged, too deliberate for random movement. It sounded like something inside was scratching the walls. I killed the radio, straining to hear. The scratching continued for perhaps 30 seconds, then ceased. I waited, holding my breath, but only the hum of the reefer and the steady roar of tires on asphalt filled the silence. I told myself it was my imagination, or some peculiar mechanical quirk of the trailer. 20 minutes later, it began again. This time it brought a companion sound that froze the blood in my veins, muffled voices. Not clear speech, but a horrifying symphony of desperation, high-pitched, panicked, as if people were screaming through gags or from behind thick soundproofing. Children, women. My gut clenched. I pulled to the shoulder, engine idling, listening to the unfolding horror from the trailer behind me. The scratching had intensified, frantic. Now, unmistakably, multiple voices, all terrified, desperate. Someone was pounding on the interior walls, metallic thuds echoing even over the drone of the refrigeration unit. My first instinct was 911, but then I remembered the guard's card. The instructions had been precise. Temperature or cargo issues. Call that number. Was this a test, or some twisted, reasonable explanation? I dialed. The man answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting. "Is there a problem with the delivery?" "There are sounds coming from inside the trailer," I forced out, my voice thin. "It sounds like there are people in there." "What you're hearing are live medical test subjects," the man replied, his tone devoid of surprise. "Primates being transported for legitimate pharmaceutical research. They become agitated during transport, which is why we use soundproofing and secure containment. This is completely legal and properly permitted. Your job, driver, is to deliver the trailer, not to interfere with the cargo." The primal screams from the trailer sent a cold splinter down my spine. Primates. That was the only rational explanation for such human-like distress. I told myself it was legal, necessary even, for medical research, a foundation of new medications saving countless lives. My mind wrestled with the sounds, trying to force them into the neat, clinical box of laboratory animals. I'd never hauled live cargo, but others had. So why hadn't I been told? Because drivers get squeamish, the voice on the phone cut through my unease, smooth and unhurried. Refuse the load. Easier to call it medical supplies, which it technically is. Now, is there a problem with the transport, or can you continue? I sat there, the phone heavy in my hand, the frantic scratching and desperate thuds from the trailer a live thing behind me. Knowing it was animals, not humans, somehow made it bearable. I'd eaten meat from creatures raised in conditions arguably worse. If this suffering led to breakthroughs, then it was a necessary evil. "I can continue," I ground out, the words tasting like ash. "Excellent," he purred. "You're being paid very well to complete this delivery without complications. I trust you will honor your professional obligations." But as I put the truck back in gear, the sounds escalated. The scratching became a frenzy, the banging a violent pulse, the voices morphing into something unmistakably desperate. An hour later, the clinical justification shredded. These were not animal sounds. They were human, and they shrieked with a terror no legitimate research would ever inflict. I pulled over again. Stepping out, the cacophony intensified. Individual voices clawed at the metal. A woman's sobs, a child's plea, a man's indistinguishable shout behind the impenetrable walls. There was no doubt left. This trailer held human souls. My gaze fell on the locks, the tamper-evident seals. Breaking them would mean destroying evidence, risking my 30 years of pristine professional driving, my reputation, the $3,000 waiting for me in Little Rock. Then, the child's cry cut through the din again, a razor's edge against my conscience. I walked to my tractor, reaching for the bolt cutters I'd carried for years, tools for a broken strap, a rusted lock, never this. My hands trembled as I positioned them on the standard padlock. This was either the most important act of my life, or the one that would shatter it. The lock parted like butter. The seal, tougher, yielded under brute force. I gripped the trailer door handle, pulled. What poured out from that dark maw will forever stain my vision. No animals, no medical supplies. 17 human beings, mostly women and children, chained to the walls, eyes wide with a terror that transcended horror. Filthy, starved, some bleeding, all traumatized. Each face a silent question. Are you salvation or another monster? I called 911. 30 minutes later, police swarmed, and the grisly truth unspooled. A human trafficking operation bridging Memphis to Arkansas. The medical supplies were lives to be sold. The pharmaceutical research, a vile screen for unimaginable depravity. 17 people live today because I broke that seal. The FBI told me that had I simply completed the delivery, most would have vanished into the criminal underworld. The dispatcher, the security guard, the smooth voice on the phone. All arrested within a week. Yet I still wake in a cold sweat, haunted by how close I came to driving away, to choosing my career over those desperate cries. How many other drivers, I wonder, have unknowingly carried such cargo, never questioning, never breaking the seal? I don't haul freight anymore. The open road, once a solace, became a constant reminder of unseen horrors. Instead, I train law enforcement, teaching them to peel back the layers of deception, to recognize the silent signs of human trafficking. Because I learned that sometimes the most professional thing you can do is break every rule. And some deliveries, the most important ones, are those that never reach their destination. They say the true danger of trucking isn't the highway itself, but the stops along the way. Mile marker 247 on Interstate 80 taught me that lesson, branded it onto my memory. My name is Daniel Cruz, and for 18 years, I prided myself on an impeccable safety record. Every regulation, every log, every piece of equipment meticulously maintained. Most crucially, where I parked for the night. That meticulous caution is precisely what kept me alive, though even now, 6 months later, I still check my mirrors with obsessive vigilance. It happened on a routine run for automotive parts from Los Angeles to Chicago. Late October, Nebraska sliced cleanly by, I-80 a black ribbon under clear skies. Traffic was light. I was making excellent time, 9 hours already behind me. My mandatory 10-hour break loomed, and I began scouting for a safe place to pull over. Experience had taught me that truck stops were not created equal. Some hummed with life and security, others felt like abandoned traps. My rule was simple: lights, other trucks, and if possible, a security presence. Mile marker 247 promised all of it. A standard DOT rest area, separate parking for cars and commercial vehicles, clean restrooms, well lit. 4 other rigs were already nestled in the truck area when I arrived around 9:30 p.m. I chose a spot squarely in the middle, a silent pact of mutual security with my fellow drivers. Post-trip checked, load secured, I settled in for what I expected to be a tranquil night. Around 10:15, as I finished paperwork and prepared for the quiet crawl into my sleeper berth, a dark blue sedan snaked into the rest area. Cars weren't unusual, families traveling late. But this one was different. It bypassed the designated car parking, instead circling slowly through the semi-trucks, a predator scenting its prey between the metallic giants. 3 deliberate passes it made, before settling where it could observe the entire lot, shrouded by the deeper shadows. Tinted windows obscured the driver, but I saw he was alone, systematically scrutinizing the parked trucks. I made a mental note of the plate, a flicker of unease stirring in my gut. 20 minutes later, the sedan glided away. Loss, confusion. I dismissed the incident, slid into sleep. But 4 hours later, needing the restroom, I found it again. Same dark blue sedan, different spot, but still watching. This time my instincts screamed. Something was profoundly wrong. On my way back from the restroom, I saw him. A middle-aged man, average height, dressed in dark clothing that melded him into the shadows between the massive trucks. He was walking slowly through the parking area, head tilted, eyes sweeping from truck to truck. He stopped at each one, lingering on license plates and company decals. When our eyes met, he froze for a beat, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze, then spun on his heel and disappeared back into his car, pulling away with a quiet rumble. The third time I saw the sedan was 2 hours later, just before dawn, as I performed my final load securement check. Once again, it was in a new position, yet still positioned to watch. Always watching. The cold breath of January still whispers through my rig, even 7 years later. Every time I merge onto an interstate stretch, I see it play out again. The gleam of headlights in my mirrors, the sickening wobble, the shattering impact. My name is Frank Rodriguez, and I've put 28 years into this life on the road. I used to think I knew its every curve, every unspoken rule. I was wrong. That night I learned that some debts, some moments, follow you forever. It was a routine haul, construction gear from Houston to Phoenix. Nothing special, but the Southwest had been a beast that winter. Ice storms, freezing rain, a brutal grind through Texas and New Mexico that had put me 2 days behind schedule. My dispatcher was a ghost in my ear, every call a reminder of the ticking clock. That final night, closing in on Phoenix, I was chasing the horizon down an isolated stretch of Interstate 10, 50 miles shy of Van Horn. Past midnight, the road was a treacherous ribbon of black ice, swallowed by a freezing fog that had rolled in from the desert. My gut screamed at me to pull over, to wait for dawn, but a desperate urgency, a weariness of delays, pushed me on. Then, the headlights. Not the blinding high beams of an impatient driver, but a soft glow, holding back about 20 miles. A small car, keeping pace. Usually I wouldn't give it a second thought, but something felt off. A subtle weave, a hesitant stutter in its path, suggesting a driver battling the slick conditions. I watched, a knot forming in my stomach, hoping they'd find their rhythm, clear the ice. The highway around us was a lonely, echoing tunnel of mist and engine hum. Around 1:30 a.m., as I approached a particularly notorious downhill, a place where concrete memories of past crashes linger, the car's headlights began to dance. A frantic, uncontrolled bobbing. It was losing the fight against the ice, fishtailing across its lane. A sudden cold certainty pierced through the fatigue. The driver was panicking, overcorrecting. I eased off the accelerator, nudged my behemoth into the left lane, trying to conjure a space of safety, a silent prayer that they would somehow, miraculously regain control. But they didn't. In the periphery of my side mirror, a sickening choreography unfolded. The car spun, a dizzying, violent pirouette, twice around, before slamming into the concrete barrier that separated my westbound lanes from the eastbound. A horrific, metallic shriek ripped through the desolate night, then an abrupt, terrifying silence. The kind of silence that echoes louder than any sound. The metallic shriek ripped through the drum of the idling engine, a sound of stripping steel and shattering glass that clawed its way into my gut. Headlights died in a blink, replaced by a ghost of steam billowing from a mangled silhouette. I wrestled the rig onto the icy shoulder, my hands fumbling for the emergency kit and flashlight, the sudden silence around my stopped truck amplifying the frantic pulse in my ears. Sprinting back, the beam of my light cut through the freezing rain, painting a horrific tableau. The driver's side crushed inward, a spiderweb of fractured glass, and a glistening carpet of shards on the asphalt. Inside, through the passenger window, a woman slumped over the steering wheel, a dark bloom on her forehead, unconscious yet still breathing. My trembling fingers dialed 911. The dispatcher's voice, a calm island in the storm, informed me that every available unit was swamped with weather-related chaos. 45 minutes, she said. 45 minutes until an ambulance. Stay with her. Keep her warm. Keep her stable. I turned back to my truck, a phantom chill seeping into my bones, a cold that had nothing to do with the weather. Blankets. First aid. But as my gaze fell on the unsecured crane, its massive steel arm gleaming under the emergency lights, a different kind of dread began to unfurl. Overweight, shortened chains. Every federal regulation I'd flouted, every corner I'd cut in my reckless dash to make time, stood stark and undeniable. A doughty inspection would rip away my CDL, my livelihood, the mortgage over my family's head. 2 decades of grinding, gone. The frigid air bit at my exposed skin. One woman, breathing, stable. Help on the way. Maybe she'll be all right without me. Maybe the officers won't inspect my truck if I'm not directly involved. Maybe I can just slip away. Drive on to Phoenix, offload, fix the chains, and bury this nightmare. The internal tremor intensified, a battle between a desperate conscience and a primal fear for my family's future. Then, in the dark, I made the worst decision of my life. I climbed back into the cab, the engine kicking over with a deceptive innocence, and drove away. For the next 3 hours, the radio became my confidant. Every news bulletin, every static-laced station, a desperate search for absolution. No news. Good news, I told myself. No fatalities. She was alive. She would recover. I delivered the load in Phoenix, the crane now cinched down with a painstaking, almost obsessive precision, and began the long, empty haul back to Houston. The guilt, a low thrum beneath my relief, started to rise. Each mile marker hammered home the truth. I was running away from her. Every time my eyes closed, Maria flashed into my mind, slumped, bleeding, breathing, abandoned. My rationalizations withered under the oppressive weight of what I knew, deep down, was a monstrous breach of human decency. 6 hours into the return trip, pushing through the same stretch of highway, the world began to warp. Patches of black ice danced at the edge of my vision, shimmering illusions in my peripherals, even as the road directly before me remained dry and clear. Then, She appeared. In the rearview mirror, standing on the shoulder, wearing the same torn clothes, the same blood-darkened forehead. Motionless, watching. My breath hitched. I squeezed my eyes shut, then opened them again. Gone. Hallucinations, guilt, sleep deprivation. But 10 miles later, she was there again, now in the median, precisely where her car had crashed. Clearer this time. Her clothes shredded, her neck bent at an impossible angle. Her eyes, empty and accusing, followed my truck. Her mouth moved, a silent scream I couldn't hear over the roar of my engine, and her hand, slow and deliberate, rose to point directly at me. Panic seized me, cold and sharp. I slammed the brakes, the air rushing out of me, the truck screeching to a halt 50 feet from where she now stood in my lane. Her injuries were clearer, more vivid, a fractured skull, an arm twisted in gruesome impossibility, blood soaking her garments in patterns of internal ruin. She walked toward me, her movements jerky, unnatural, like a broken puppet forced to dance. As she neared, her lips moved ceaselessly, a desperate, silent mantra. She pressed her palms against my windshield, her pale face inches from mine, eyes bloodshot and brimming with silent tears. And then I understood. Her lips formed the words over and over. You left me to die. You left me to die. I jammed the key, twisted it. Nothing. The engine was dead. My CB crackled with static, my cell phone, a useless brick without signal. Trapped. Alone. With the ghost of Maria Santos. She walked to my door, climbed onto the running board, her face pressing against the glass. A mist formed on the window from her breath, a chilling testament to her impossible presence. Then she began to tap. Slowly, rhythmically, a gentle knock. Each tap left a small smear of scarlet, and as the patterns coalesced, a single word formed. Murderer. The full horror of it settled over me. She hadn't died instantly. She had lived, had been conscious, breathing. When I found her, she had waited for the help I'd promised, only for me to vanish into the night. She had succumbed to internal devastation, treatable injuries, dying alone, confused, wondering where the one chance she'd had gone. Maria stepped back, returning to the front of my truck. Her eyes, filled with an unbearable cocktail of sadness and rage, burned into mine. And then she screamed. A sound that tore through the steel and glass, through the roar of the idling engine, piercing my very soul. A primal wail of despair and accusation that echoed from every direction. It lasted an eternity, a soul-shattering shriek. Then, silence. She was gone, and my truck engine, with an obedient purr, sprang to life. I drove the rest of the way to Houston in a silent tomb, the radio dark. At home, the first thing I did was what I should have done that night. I searched. The local newspaper archives coughed up the truth. Maria Santos, 23, nursing student, University of Texas. Accident at 1:47 a.m., discovered by a maintenance crew at 3:15 a.m. Medical examiner's report, internal bleeding, initially conscious and alert. Died approximately 20 minutes before discovery. If I had stayed, if I had called sooner, if I had offered the basic first aid I'd carried, she would still be alive. The road stretched endless under the Texas sky, a black ribbon unfolding toward a desert night that promised nothing but quiet miles. It was late November, and Paul Carter Assi, had been chasing that horizon for 16 years, a veteran long-haul driver with a furniture load bound from Dallas to Denver. The weather had been perfect, clear and fast, and by 8:30 p.m., as the sun melted into my rear view, I picked up chatter on Channel 19. A convoy north of Amarillo. A voice, calm and deep, called himself Big Jake, beckoning northbound rigs to join for the run through New Mexico and Colorado. Safety in numbers, he'd rumbled, especially on those forgotten stretches. It sounded like a blessing. A seasoned crew, a shared journey, a respite from the road's relentless solitude. I keyed the mic, asked for details, and Big Jake responded instantly, giving me coordinates and a 9:15 p.m. sharp departure, 70 Mampu, straight to Raton, New Mexico. Professional, organized, exactly my kind of convoy. I found them at a vast truck stop on Amarillo's northern edge. 5 rigs, gleaming and serious, lined up like steel monoliths. A classic Peterbilt 379, a Kenworth W900, a Freightliner Classic, a Max Superliner, an International 9900 all vintage, all immaculate. I parked behind the International, then headed for the lead rig, hoping to meet Big Jake. But the cab was empty. He must be inside, I thought, maybe grabbing a final coffee. Inside, the truck stop hummed with lonely travelers, but no one matched the description of a convoy driver. At the fuel desk, a young woman with a friendly face looked puzzled when I asked about the group assembling outside. I pointed through the glass toward the 5 silent titans. She followed my gaze, then turned back to me with a blank stare. "I only see your truck out there," she said, her voice laced with genuine concern. "Are you feeling all right?" My eyes snapped back to the window. The 5 trucks stood exactly where they had been, stark against the fading light. A shiver, cold and sharp, traced its way down my spine. I mumbled a thanks, a half-hearted excuse, and walked back outside, a strange unease settling in my gut. Exactly at 9:15. Big Jake's voice, now imbued with an unsettling resonance, crackled over the radio, calling the convoy to move. One by one, the 5 Phantom engines roared to life. I fired up my own rig, pulling in as the 6th truck, following them onto Highway 287 northbound. Big Jake welcomed me, outlining the route, and for the first hour, everything felt normal. We held perfect formation, a silent ballet of steel against the deepening night. The other drivers, unseen, were professional, exchanging terse information about road conditions. I started to relax, the earlier unease fading into the rhythm of the highway. Then, as we plunged deeper into the New Mexico desert, details began to snag. We'd been doing 70 for over an hour, yet not a single vehicle had passed us, nor had we passed any. 287 wasn't a highway for crowds, but this was absolute. And then I noticed it. None of the other trucks, these titans of the night, had their headlights on. At 10:30, a cold knot tightening in my stomach, I keyed the mic. "Hey, Big Jake," I radioed, trying to keep my voice steady. "You might want to remind the boys to turn on their lights. It's getting pretty dark out here." The reply came, not in Big Jake's familiar baritone, but a hollow, echoing whisper, as if spoken from the bottom of a well, a voice that crawled under my skin and froze the blood in my veins. "We do not need lights where we are going, Paul. We can see perfectly fine in the darkness." I had never told anyone in that convoy my name. This was only the beginning. Nearly 3 years ago, I finally did what I should have done 7 years earlier. I contacted the El Paso Police Department. I confessed everything. How I'd found Maria Santos on that frozen stretch of highway, how fear for my career had made me call for help, then abandon her. I gave a detailed statement, endured questioning, cooperated fully. The detective was sympathetic but grim. The statute of limitations had run out. There was no proof my presence would have saved her. Yet he helped me find her family. I met them. I apologized, the words tasting like ash in my mouth for failing their daughter when she needed help most. Every penny of my trucking career savings now funds a scholarship in Maria's Chi. Name at the University of Texas Nursing School. But none of it, the confession, the apology, the anonymous scholarship matters to her ghost. She appears still, with the same frequency, driven by her silent, unwavering accusation. The patches of ice on clear summer roads, the freezing fog in desert heat, the radio and phone dying mid-sentence, these are her omens. She always wears the same clothes, bears the same injuries, her finger perpetually pointing at me, her eyes burning with an unquenchable fire. And on my windshield, on my side window, in the dew of a freezing night, she etches the same word with bloody fingers. Murderer. I've altered routes, fled that highway stretch, but it's useless. She finds me in truck stops in Montana, on city streets in Florida, even in my driveway in Houston. Geography, logic, they mean nothing to her. Only the connection, forged by my cowardice and her death, binds us. She knows, and I know, that no amount of money or legal technicalities can erase the fundamental truth. I left a dying woman alone on a frozen highway to protect my own life. I stopped driving trucks. Every mile became a reminder, every accident a replay of that night's horrific choice. Now 62 years old, I volunteer as an EMT, responding to emergencies, trying to balance the scales, to save as many lives as I can. It will never be enough. Every reflection, every window, every puddle holds her image, her bloody finger. Some mistakes follow you forever. Some debts can never be repaid. The road is unforgiving, but not nearly as unforgiving as the ghosts of those we fail when we choose ourselves. Maria Santos is my constant companion, my visible scar, my audible silence. In that critical moment, I chose cowardice over courage, self-interest over sacrifice. And that choice I carry with me. In every moment I must decide whether to stop or to keep driving. The air in the cab crackled, thick with a chill that had nothing to do with the desert night. My CB handle, Lonier, felt like a shield, but it had crumbled the moment Big Jake had called me by my real name. Paul. I hadn't given anyone my name. My rational mind tried to construct an explanation, an overheard word during a dispatcher call, but the channels had been different. A pit opened in my stomach. Ahead, 5 hulking shadows churned through the darkness. No headlights, no marker lights, nothing. They moved like silent behemoths, gaunt silhouettes against the fainter charcoal of the sky. I strained to make out details, but the harder I focused, the more elusive they became, flickering at the edges of perception. Then, the road itself began to unravel my sanity. For over an hour, I'd been heading north on Highway 287. My GPS, however, insisted I hadn't moved an inch. Mile markers repeated themselves in an impossible loop, a taunting echo of unchanging numbers. I grabbed the company radio, desperate to report my location. Only static answered, cold and venomous. My cell phone, in an area usually humming with signal, was dead. Cut off, isolated. Trapped in a formation of phantom trucks on a highway to nowhere. Having second thoughts, Paul? Big Jake's voice slithered through the radio again, but it was colder now, a hollow whisper like wind through an empty ruin. Wondering if you made the right decision when you joined our little convoy. Too late now. Once you're part of the Brotherhood, you travel with us forever. A single glance in my rearview mirror made my foot slam the brake pedal, but the truck didn't respond. Behind me, stretching into an infinite abyss, was an endless column of rigs. Dozens, hundreds, all unlit, all mirroring my impossible journey through the New Mexico desert. I was no longer the sixth in a small chain. I was a single link in an eternal, silent procession. These weren't modern trucks like mine. They were hulks from bygone eras, classic Peterbilts with their proud long hoods, ancient Macs, their bulldog ornaments gleaming faintly. International harvesters that belonged in museums. Their drivers were indistinct, shadowy forms behind windshields that reflected only darkness. I wrestled the steering wheel, trying to veer onto the shoulder, to slow down, to escape. But the wheel was locked. The brakes were dead. The accelerator, a cruel master, pressed forward relentlessly. I was a captive, hurtling into an unknown beyond my control. Then, Big Jake's voice returned, but this time it was joined. Dozens of voices, a chilling chorus, speaking in a unified, hollow echo. "Welcome to the Eternal Convoy, Paul. We have been waiting for you." Their words unwound a tapestry of dread. "We have been traveling these roads since our accidents, since our heart attacks, since our various deaths behind the wheel. We cannot rest until we reach our final destination, and we cannot reach our final destination without new drivers to replace the ones who finally fade away." The sickening truth unfurled. This was no ordinary convoy. This was a spectral legion, the ghosts of truckers damned to an endless journey, forever searching for living souls to take their places. Each voice was a fragment of a tragedy. A heart attack near Ryden in 87, a Kenworth wrapped around a bridge abutment in 93, a Freightliner driver shot during a robbery in 98. They had died alone, each cursed to drive until a replacement could be found. I screamed, I prayed. I even twisted the key in the ignition, but the engine hummed on, untouched by my desperate pleas. The fuel gauge crept steadily towards empty, yet the truck surged forward, powered by an unseen force. Hours bled into days, time itself fractured. The same mile markers, the same barren desert, the same dead voices, a tormenting loop. I felt my own vitality draining, a slow siphon working to turn me into one of them. Just as the horror threatened to consume me entirely, a memory surfaced. My grandfather's words. A trucker himself, he'd warned me about the dangers beyond blowouts and black ice. "If you ever find yourself in supernatural trouble," he'd said, "focus on the people who love you, the life waiting for you at home, the reasons you have to stay alive." Jennifer, her face, her laughter. Our 2 young children, their vivid smiles, the Christmas presents I'd promised, the summer vacation we'd planned. All the mundane, precious moments of family life. I clung to them, a lifeline to the world of the living. Slowly, agonizingly, control seeped back into my hands. The steering wheel loosened. The brakes faintly responded. I slowed, pulling over to the shoulder. In my mirrors, the spectral convoy glided past, their drivers turning their hollow, envious gazes on me as they vanished into the endless night. 10 minutes later, shaking but whole, I pulled back onto the highway. My GPS, miraculously, showed me exactly where I should be. The loop was broken. At the truck stop in Ryton, the clerk wasn't surprised when I asked about phantom convoys. She knew Highway 287 as the Phantom Highway, a stretch where ghost trucks were a local legend, a tale often dismissed as driver fatigue, but one she knew held a deeper, colder truth. I finished my run to Denver, but the horror of that night remains etched in my soul. I still drive 287 when the route demands, but never after dark, and I never, ever answer a CB call about forming a convoy. Because somewhere out there, in the impenetrable darkness, Big Jake and his eternal brotherhood drive on, forever searching, their journey an endless, living death. The brotherhood of the road is real, but some brotherhoods are not for the living. Some convoys traverse highways that exist outside of time and space, carrying drivers who can never reach their final destination because they are already dead. I was lucky, but I know others haven't been so fortunate. Every CB call, every line of unlit trucks in the gloom, brings back Big Jake's chilling promise. Once you're part of the brotherhood, you travel with us forever. The road holds dangers that cannot be fixed by a wrench or avoided with a defensive maneuver. Some hazards are supernatural, and the only shield against them is the anchoring force of love and life itself. I learned that the hard way, on a night when the highway itself became a tomb. Rex's truck repair on Highway 50 saved my bacon more times than I could count. Rex treated every driver like family. That's what made discovering his basement workshop all the more sickening. My name is Tommy Garrett, and I've been running freight between Kansas City and Denver for 12 years. And in all that time, there was no mechanic I trusted more than Rex Morrison, whose small repair shop sat in the middle of nowhere, somewhere between Dodge City and Garden City, Kansas. The air in Rex's service bay always smelled of hot oil and possibility. Nothing fancy, just a couple of bays and a small office, yet tales of his mechanical wizardry echoed across state lines. Rex himself was the stuff of legend, the honest, 24/7 lifeline every trucker swore by. Fair prices, no frills, just getting you back on the asphalt, usually faster than you'd think humanly possible. He'd bailed me out more times than I could count. Blown tires, engine failures, electrical gremlins, transmissions seizing up like rusted gears. On that lonely stretch of Kansas highway, Rex was our mechanical guardian angel. That comfort, that absolute trust, was why I never questioned the little oddities. His shop's impossible business, despite its middle-of-nowhere location, his uncanny ability to diagnose a rig before even lifting the hood, or his insistence that we drivers hunker down in his customer lounge instead of pushing on to the nearest truck stop. I trusted Rex completely, and that trust, I would soon discover, was a coiled viper. The true nature of Rex, the man who'd been my savior so many times, uncoiled on a brutal February night. I was hauling agricultural equipment from Kansas City to Colorado Springs, running ahead of schedule, lulled by the hum of the road. Then, a low, grinding growl clawed its way from beneath my truck, a sound I'd never heard, ominous and escalating. It was the drivetrain, and it announced itself with a visceral shudder, promising a complete breakdown if I didn't act fast. Rex's shop was still 40 miles out, but I limped the rig, praying it would hold, rather than chance a faceless roadside tow. I pulled into his desolate lot at 10:30 p.m., the grinding noise now a metallic scream. Before I could even cut the engine, Rex was there, a shadow emerging from the dim shop lights. Same grease-stained coveralls, same easy smile, but tonight, something was different. His eyes, usually warm and reassuring, held a glint I hadn't seen, calculating, almost predatory. "What brings you by, Tommy?" he asked, though he was already circling my rig like a hunter sizing up prey. Grinding noise, I managed, the tremor in my voice betraying my unease. "Drivetrain. Hour ago. Getting worse." Rex nodded, a knowing, almost theatrical gesture, then ducked beneath the truck, his flashlight beam piercing the night. 2 minutes later, he re-emerged, shaking his head, his weathered face etched with ersatz concern. "Major differential problem, son. Driveshaft couplings completely shot, took out the ring and pinion gears. You're damn lucky you made it." It sounded catastrophic and expensive. "How long to fix?" "Parts gotta come from Wichita," he sighed, the weekend looming. "Probably Monday morning for delivery. Then figure 6 to 8 hours labor. 3, maybe 4 days minimum, Tommy." 4 days. My delivery schedule, my contract, all of it shattering. But what choice did I have? Highway 50 in winter was a death trap for broken-down trucks, and Rex was the only qualified mechanic for 100 miles. I agreed, asking about a motel in town. He waved it off with a paternal hand. "No need to waste money. My customer lounge is all set. Bed, kitchen. Stay as long as you need, no charge. Part of the service." I'd used that lounge before. It was surprisingly comfortable, a cut above any truck stop, with a real bed, a small fridge, even decent TV reception. Rex's generosity was legendary, another brick in the wall of his sterling reputation. I moved my duffel, resigned to a dull but comfortable wait. Rex lived in an apartment above the shop, so I wouldn't be entirely alone. But this was rural Kansas. There was little to do but read, watch TV, and wait. I called my dispatcher, spun a tale of woe, and tried to make peace with the delay. The first night passed uneventfully. Rex brought me dinner from a diner in town. We talked trucks, weather, easy conversation. I drifted off to sleep around 11, grateful for his steady presence, the quiet warmth of the lounge, a stark contrast to the howling wind outside. It was the second night that the quiet began to fray. A rhythmic thrumming, faint at first, vibrated up through the floorboards. It wasn't the familiar clatter of air tools or the hiss of hydraulics. This was deeper, more mechanical, an industrial pulse that felt fundamentally out of place in a country garage. Around 2 a.m. needing the bathroom, I noticed a sliver of light beneath Rex's office door, near a stack of old tires. A basement entrance I'd never seen. The door was ajar, a warm glow spilling onto the stairs, leading down into what looked like an underground labyrinth. The mechanical thrum was louder here, vibrating in my bones. And then, voices. Not the usual workshop banter, but a calm, business-like discussion. Not about transmissions or axles, but schedules, delivery routes, and something chillingly referred to as harvesting operations. My stomach clenched. This wasn't truck talk. My gut screamed at me to retreat, to bury my head in the pillows and pretend I'd heard nothing. But the creeping dread, the sheer incongruity of it all, pulled me forward. I crept down the stairs, each step a carefully placed whisper in the oppressive silence, clinging to the shadows. The basement was vast, sprawling far beyond the shop's footprint, a secret world carved beneath the prairie. It was a factory floor, gleaming with industrial presses, metal cutters, welding stations, even a small foundry. But it was what Rex was making that froze me. Along one wall, dozens of metal plates, each etched with VINs and registration info from trucks I recognized. Not replacement parts, forgeries, plates designed to vanish a truck, to give it a new, illicit identity. Rex wasn't just fixing rigs, he was remaking them. Then I saw it. In the center of the cavernous space, Rex, flanked by 2 other men, worked on a truck. A chill snaked down my spine. It was Carl Madison's rig, the one that had supposedly been repaired and sent on its way 3 weeks ago. Now, it was being systematically dismantled, rebuilt with forged plates already in place. My gaze swept the room again. Engines, transmissions, cargo trailers, all bearing the legitimate markings of trucking companies, yet clearly stripped from vehicles destined for oblivion. Rex wasn't running a repair shop. He was operating a chop shop, a black hole for rigs and drivers alike. And then, the ultimate horror. In a dim corner, almost swallowed by shadow, lay heaps of personal effects. Wallets, driver's licenses, cell phones. At least 20 distinct piles, each representing a driver who had sought Rex's help and, like Carl, had simply vanished. Rex wasn't just stealing trucks, he was erasing the men who drove them. The customer lounge wasn't a courtesy, it was a holding cell. My heart hammered against my ribs, echoing in the deafening silence of the basement. I backed away, one torturous step at a time, each creak of the old stairs a thunderclap in my ears. I had to get out. But my truck was disabled, my phone dead to the rural signal. I was exactly where all the others had been, isolated, helpless, trapped in the crosshairs of a serial killer disguised as a saint. I stumbled back into the lounge, the warmth now feeling like an oven. The nearest town was 8 miles. Impossible to walk, and Rex would know the moment I left. The prairie, once a symbol of endless freedom, now felt like an impossible, suffocating cage. The electronic sign blared its silent command over Interstate 5. All commercial vehicles must stop. Steve Martinez, a man whose 19 years behind the wheel had etched a roadmap onto his soul, sighed. Just another routine weigh-in at Bakersfield, 60 miles north of L.A. He'd navigated countless such stops, his logs meticulous, his rig pristine, his cargo secured. This Tuesday morning, hauling electronics from Los Angeles to Phoenix felt no different. He'd done this run 100 times, and soon he'd be home with his family in Tucson. Yet, an unseen current of unease stirred beneath the humming diesel of his truck as he steered into the designated lane. 8 months later, that hum was a ghost in his sleep. Bakersfield wasn't just a wait station. It was where the road ended for countless others, and nearly for him. He'd seen the monster behind the friendly smile, the predator camouflaged as a helper. He'd lived to tell the tale, unlike the 23 souls whose final moments were archived in a blood-stained basement. Steve knew, with chilling certainty, he couldn't confront Rex Morrison directly. The man had proven his ruthlessness, his capacity for murder. Steve's only chance was to dismantle the operation from within. In the pre-dawn stillness, long after Rex and his cronies had surrendered to sleep, Steve moved through the customer lounge, adrenaline a cold river in his veins. His hand closed around a heavy-duty flashlight, a makeshift club, a desperate prayer. Then, among Rex's carelessly discarded repair tools, he spotted them, wire cutters. A silent promise. Creeping down into the dimly lit basement around 4 a.m., Steve became a shadow. Each snip of the cutters was a whispered defiance against the silence. Power cables severed, control panels mangled. Forging equipment, the very forge of Rex's evil, reduced to silent, inert metal. He worked with the precision of a surgeon and the urgency of a condemned man, each cut a small victory against the looming threat of discovery. The true horror unveiled itself when his gaze fell upon a locked filing cabinet. With a surge of desperate strength, Steve pried it open. Inside, stacked and catalogued with meticulous, terrifying detail, were records spanning 15 years, schedules, manifests, routes. This wasn't the work of an opportunistic killer. It was a deeply embedded network. Rex wasn't just a monster. He was part of a monstrous system with tentacles reaching into truck stops, shipping companies, even law enforcement. The documents laid bare the blueprints of their terror. Drivers targeted, rigs sabotaged, cargo stolen, and sold through a web of corrupt dealers. A sophisticated criminal enterprise thriving in the shadows, fueled by the isolation of the open road. Steve's phone camera flashed, capturing the grim evidence, though no signal would carry it out of this hell. He scattered driver's licenses, grim mementos, across the floor. He left the cabinet gaping, its damning contents exposed. He arranged forged license plates where no one could miss them. He created a breadcrumb trail, a desperate plea to anyone who might follow. Even if I don't make it, he thought, someone will know. By dawn, his work was done. He slid back into the customer lounge, feigning sleep, the heavy flashlight discreetly placed within reach. At 7 a.m., Rex Morrison appeared, his usual affable mask firmly in place. He asked about Steve's sleep, offered breakfast from town. Steve accepted, a knot of sickening hope twisting in his gut for the man to leave, to buy him time. But Rex's eyes, Steve realized now, held a flicker of suspicion. Instead of heading to town, the mechanic descended into his workshop. A primal roar ripped through the floorboards. Rex knew. Steve's heart hammered against his ribs. He grabbed the flashlight, a steel extension of his will, and positioned himself behind the lounge door. When Rex burst in, a pistol gripped in his hand, his eyes blazing with murderous fury, Steve met him. The flashlight connected with a sickening thud, and Rex crumpled. Steve snatched the pistol, the keys, and sprinted for the shop. His own rig was dead, but an older Peterbilt, Rex's personal vehicle, gleamed like salvation. The keys clicked, the engine roared to life, and Steve was gone, tires spitting gravel. He drove straight to the Kansas State Police headquarters in Dodge City, recounting his nightmare. The officers, initially skeptical, saw the cold, hard evidence on his phone and in his frenzied description. A SWAT team converged on Rex's shop that afternoon. They found everything Steve had promised. Rex Morrison and his 2 associates were arrested, charged with murder, theft, and racketeering. The investigation revealed a horrifying 16-year reign of terror, 23 drivers murdered, over $12 million in cargo stolen. Rex's network, a malignant spread across 6 states, reached into organized crime syndicates using stolen trucks to traffic drugs and weapons. The 23 vanished souls were finally identified. Their families offered the cold comfort of truth. Stolen trucks were recovered, though most of the cargo was already lost to the shadows. Rex received a life sentence. His associates were given decades. The corrupt officials, exposed by Steve's courageous act, faced their own reckoning. The entire enterprise crumbled, yet a chilling realization echoed through the justice system. Similar operations, hidden in plain sight, preyed on the solitary travelers of the American road. Steve testified, his voice clear and unwavering, detailing the mechanisms of Rex's cruelty. The prosecutor credited his testimony with securing convictions, with ripping open the veiled world of truck theft. But the triumph was hollow. The memory of 23 personal effects in that basement, the knowledge that he had trusted a man who slaughtered fellow drivers for over a decade, haunted him. He still drives the same routes through Kansas, but small, isolated repair shops are now silent monuments to his paranoia. He'd learned that the most trustworthy, the most helpful, can be the most dangerous. Rex Morrison, the reliable mechanic, had used his reputation as a lure for 15 years, drawing victims into his web. Trust, Steve knew, was a trucker's most vital currency and their gravest vulnerability. Every time he passed the empty lot where Rex's shop once stood, marked now by a historical plaque warning of dangers, he saw Carl Madison and the 22 others. The building was gone, but the evil that had festered beneath its innocent facade lingered. The road, he understood, was full of people offering help. But some of them were predators, exploiting isolation, preying on a trucker's need for assistance, luring them to their deaths. Rex Morrison, the smiling killer, thrived because he understood that truth. The moment my rig rolled onto the scale platform, a cold prickle traced its way up my spine. Something was off. The officers waving me through wore uniforms that frayed at the edges of familiarity patches, and insignia just a shade too vibrant, a stitch out of place. The squat building itself, grimy and skeletal with peeling paint, hummed with a different kind of silence than most DOT facilities. I edged onto the scale, engine idling, waiting for the familiar beep of a weight confirmation. Instead, a heavy-set man in his early 50s, sunglasses shadowing his eyes, strode toward my window. A thick mustache bristled above a tight, humorless mouth. His uniform read, Department of Transportation. But the cut, the fabric it whispered of imitation. The badge, though, glinted authentic enough. "Shut it down," he barked, no preamble, no greeting. His voice rasped, coarser than any officer I'd ever encountered. License, registration, logbook. My documents, pristine and current, slid through the open window. He took them, not with the quick flick of an experienced hand, but with a lingering, almost theatrical slowness, meticulously thumbing through each page, his pen scratching notations on a clipboard for an eternity that stretched to 5 minutes. Then, With a curt snap, he handed them back. "Inspection bay. Pull forward. Engine off. Don't leave your vehicle." "Problem, officer?" My politeness felt like a shield against his aggression. "Weight okay? Documentation?" "Routine inspection," he snapped, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond my truck. "Now." I maneuvered into a covered bay, separate from the main traffic flow, the air thick with the smell of stale exhaust and rust. He circled my truck like a vulture, his flashlight beam slicing through the gloom, lingering on tires, lights, cargo straps. This was a Doughty inspection, yes, but stretched taut, past the usual 15 minutes, creeping toward an hour. He paused particularly long at my trailer, snapping photographs of my secured load. Finally, he motioned me out of the cab and steered me toward the main building. The interior was a cavern, dimly lit, almost deserted. Two other figures in those same off-kilter uniforms hunched over desks, their backs to the world, absorbed in paperwork, ignoring the ghostly traffic outside. The whole place felt like a stage set, designed to mimic authority, but devoid of its true pulse. "We found several violations," his voice echoed in a small, windowless office. "Improper load securement, equipment violations, discrepancies in your logbook." He listed them like a prosecutor. "Significant fines, vehicle out of service." Shock slammed into me. My morning inspection had confirmed perfect securement. My rig had passed a detailed checkup just 2 weeks ago. My logbook was a paragon of accuracy. "Details?" I asked, my voice tight. "What specific violations?" He waved a dismissive hand. $8,000. Cash. Now. Or we impound your vehicle and cargo. 60, 90 days, typically. $8,000. For routine violations. An impossible sum, a number plucked from thin air. But the thought of losing my truck, my livelihood, for 3 months. It was a death knell. My business, my house gone. "I don't have $8,000 in cash," I stated, the words tasting like ash. "Can I arrange payment through my company? A payment plan?" He smiled then, a chilling, predatory curve of his lips. "Cash only for immediate resolution. But we have arrangements, local businesses, short-term loans for drivers in your situation, for a reasonable fee, naturally." The gears finally clicked. This wasn't off. It was a setup. The imitation uniforms, the rundown facility, the vague violations, the impossible fine, the instant loan sharks, it all coalesced into sickening clarity. This was a sophisticated, criminal enterprise, leveraging the uniform of the law to fleece desperate drivers. "I need to call my company's safety department." My voice took on a new edge. "No calls during active inspection," he stated flatly. "Supervisor?" "In court. Back tomorrow." Every avenue for help was blocked. Every request for verification met a wall of stone. Trapped. The feeling of helplessness swelled, a cold tide rising around my neck. He led me to another room. A woman in civilian clothes, sharp-eyed and efficient, sat behind a desk, loan papers spread before her. She was a financial services specialist, she said, offering emergency loans for commercial drivers. The terms were a bandit's ransom, $8,000 at 30% interest, payable in 30 days, my truck and cargo as collateral. Presented as my only salvation. I reached for the pen. My hand trembled. Then, through the dingy window of the office, I saw it. Another figure, not in uniform, a shadow flitting around my truck in the inspection bay. He was loading my boxes, my cargo, into a plain white van. Part of my shipment, vanishing, right under their noses. The full, horrifying scope snapped into focus. This wasn't just fake fines and predatory loans, it was a diversion. A meticulously crafted stage play designed to distract me while they stripped my trailer bare. Law enforcement as a smokescreen for grand larceny. I slammed my hand on the desk, the sound echoing in the stale air. I'm calling the California Highway Patrol. Now, to verify this inspection. The change in the room was instantaneous. The fake officer's face contorted, his voice rising, venomous. Interfering with a Doughty inspection is a federal crime. The loan shark woman began frantically stuffing papers into her satchel. The bureaucratic facade shattered, revealing raw panic beneath. I moved for the door. I'm walking out right now, and I'm calling 911. He lunged, grabbing my arm, his grip surprisingly weak against my surge of adrenaline. I ripped free, already halfway to the exit. And then, through another window, a sight that froze the blood in my veins. 6 other trucks, scattered around the inspection bays in various states of disarray. And no drivers. Weeds, thick and green, pushing up through the cracked asphalt around their tires. I ran to my truck. Key in the ignition, doors locked. The fake officer was screaming something, unintelligible, lost in the roar of my engine. I slammed it into gear. The nightmare wasn't over. The exit. It was gated, a massive metal barrier. An electronic lock, controlled from a small booth manned by one of their cronies. A trap. Do I ram it and risk everything, or search for another way out, blindly into unknown dangers? There was no choice. Property damage was a small price to pay. I floored the accelerator, the diesel engine screaming, the truck surging forward. The gate buckled, then shattered with a deafening screech of tortured metal, alarms shrieking as I burst through, leaving the scattering figures and their crumbling stage set behind me. I drove until the tremors in my hands subsided, straight to the nearest real police station. The California Highway Patrol officers who took my statement were skeptical at first, their faces creased with doubt. But when I led them back to the abandoned facility, the truth, stark and damning, lay exposed. Evidence of a sophisticated criminal enterprise, months in the making, targeting truckers like prey. The investigation revealed they had taken over a closed, state-abandoned wait station, retrofitting it to appear operational, complete with fake equipment and meticulously fabricated uniforms. Cargo theft, financial fraud, extortion and, in some cases, outright truck hijacking when drivers resisted. 7 arrests followed: the fake officers, the loan shark, the cargo thieves. They had victimized at least 40 drivers over 6 months, stealing more than $3 million in merchandise and extorting hundreds of thousands in fraudulent fees. Then, the final, chilling revelation. The 6 trucks I'd seen, shrouded in weeds, their drivers inexplicably absent. Those drivers, they told me, had fought back. They had been murdered. Their trucks, trophies, awaiting black market sale. If I hadn't seen the theft, hadn't escaped when I did, I would have been the 7th. The ringleader received life without parole for multiple counts of murder and racketeering. His associates, sentences ranging from 2 to 5 decades. The fake wait station was razed, a grim monument to a nightmare made real. And the California Highway Patrol, shaken by the audacity of it all, implemented new security protocols, forever patrolling the thin, shifting line between law and lawlessness. The rumble of the Freightliner always softened a fraction as we approached a way station, a legal mandate that, I now understood, transformed us into targets. We're bound by law to pull over, to submit to inspection, making us easy prey for anyone bold enough to don a uniform and stake a claim in what looked like official territory. Who among us would truly question a DOT uniform, a seemingly official facility, especially when the air hung heavy with threats of crippling fines and impoundment? I know I wouldn't have. Not before Bakersfield. Now, a folded, worn list of legitimate wait station contacts is a permanent fixture in my cab. Every unscheduled stop, Every inspection that feels a shade too aggressive, too arbitrary, is met with a quiet, steely-eyed verification. That gnawing doubt, that flicker of unease in the gut. I've learned to trust it, even when facing someone draped in the mantle of the law. And if that flicker grows into a roar, if my instincts scream predator, I no longer hesitate. The real police, they're the ones getting the call. Bakersfield taught me that the veneer of law and order can mask the most insidious corruption. A uniform, I learned, doesn't always make the officer. A badge doesn't always mean legitimate authority. Sometimes, the hands reaching out to protect us are, in fact, poised to victimize, using our ingrained respect for the law as their most potent weapon. Every mile marker nearing a way station now brings with it a cold shiver of memory. I see the phantom trucks, parked like macabre trophies in that criminal facility, each representing one of the 6 drivers who vanished into the Bakersfield dust. They nearly took me too. Those imposters, they burned a lesson into my soul. Vigilance isn't disrespect, it's survival. Skepticism isn't cynicism. It's a shield on roads where predators wear badges and uniforms, feigning protection while plotting plunder. The highway is a grand stage for charlatans, and the most dangerous among them are often the ones who appear most legitimate, their authority unchallenged until it's too late. Sometimes the only way to live to see another dawn is to question everything, especially when your gut tells you to run.